If the name Sidney Lumet sounds familiar, you most likely recognize him as the director who gave us 12 Angry Men, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, and Network.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
Lumet is renowned for making classics with razor-sharp dialogue, gritty realism, and an unmatched ability to examine flawed, desperate human beings under a microscope. In a career spanning over 50 years and more than 40 films, Lumet never lost his nerve, moral clarity, or ferocious energy. Or so I thought. When Before the Devil Knows You're Dead arrived in 2007, it carried an unspoken weight. It would eventually be known as his final film. At 85 years old, most directors are long retired, coasting on prestige projects, or working on self-congratulating slop. Lumet instead delivered a vicious, ice-cold family tragedy / heist noir that many consider one of his darkest and most unflinching works. Working with a dream cast led by Philip Seymour Hoffman,
The Suck Zone,
Albert Finney, Ethan Hawke, Rosemary Harris, and Marissa Tomei at the height of their powers, he crafted a movie that feels like the brutal, stripped-down essence of everything he'd been saying about America since 1957. It's a movie so bleak that it flirts with being completely straight black humor. The plot may be a little out there, with Ethan Hawke's cartoonish hack for dodging consequences straining belief, but as a final statement from a towering legend, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead is a gripping and tragic tale. Let me run down the plot for you. Just before I jump into that, please give me 20 seconds to let you know that Sam Aurelian is a completely independent channel with no generative AI being used to make my videos. I'm also just barely getting off the ground here. If you like this video, if you're seeing it at all, because YouTube apparently hates my long-form content, please subscribe and help me make $1 million on coffee. Without further ado, Andy Hansen had always been jealous of his younger, handsome, golden brother Hank. When Andy is facing a business audit that would reveal he'd been embezzling funds, he enlists help from Hank, who is kinda suffering from severe brain fog amid his divorce and subsequent affair with Andy's wife, Gina, better known as Aunt May. Hank agrees to help Andy and skim a little bit of the funds for himself by going to their childhood hometown to rob their parents' jewelry store. Andy says that he himself cannot commit this crime, as he has been seen around the neighborhood recently. Philip Seymour Hoffman's acting, coupled with the general dishonesty of this character, very heavily imply that he just wants plausible deniability in case Hank messes it up. It's kind of a good plan, actually. Andy's idea is to do it when the only employee working is Doris, an old lady who couldn't kick rocks literally or otherwise. Furthermore, he told Hank to just use a toy gun, and cements that it's really a victimless crime since their parents have insurance. I guess Andy went to the Black Lives Matter School of Economics. And to top it all off, finding an unscrupulous fence is as easy as going through their dad's Rolodex. Now I just want to go over the plan one more time. Hank goes in the jewelry store, scares a little old lady with a toy gun, gets the gems, and leaves. Andy receives the gems, pawns them off, and saves himself from an embezzlement charge. Easy, isn't it? So simple and straightforward that only a complete and total moron with his brains and his toes could mess it up. Hank decides that he needs backup to rob Doris. He not only goes behind Andy's back to hire an accomplice, he hires an experienced thief named Bobby. Then on the night of the robbery, it turned out that the brother's mother, Nanette, also better known as Aunt May, is covering for Doris. Nanette retrieves a hidden gun to try and kill Bobby, but Bobby shoots back and nails her. However, Nanette gets the last shot out and kills Bobby before passing out herself as Hank drives away. Nanette lies comatose for a week before succumbing to her injuries. Bobby's brother, Dex, begins to threaten Hank, telling him to give him $10,000 for Bobby's widow, Chris, or die. Again, any moron could have avoided all this by not hiring a criminal. At Nanette's wake, Andy and his dad, Charles, have a heart-to-heart. Now, as opposed to more like a heart-to-wall, seeing how Andy is so psychologically compromised by his hatred for his father that he can't even forgive him when he apologizes. When Charles apologizes, Andy is so far gone that he asks if Charles is really his father. Understandably, Charles doesn't take this very well, and as Andy leaves, he has what is by and far the most perfect mental breakdown I've ever seen in a movie, as Marissa Tomei gets the ick. Later, when Andy's bosses try to contact him regarding what the audit had revealed, Gina leaves him. She said he doesn't tell her anything anymore. She brings up his mental breakdown in the car, and Andy is stone cold here. He doesn't even react and is doubtful whether he's even processing the words coming out of his wife's mouth properly. She tells him that she's been cheating on him with his brother, and he still doesn't respond. When she asks him for some money to support herself, he just gives her cash. You can't help but feel kind of bad for Andy during all this. He got greedy a year or two ago. Now the one thing that could have saved him from prison has completely collapsed, resulting in the death of his dear mother, all because he didn't keep a tight enough rein on his brother, who's been cucking him for an entire year, which only started because he didn't want to tell his wife about the embezzlement. Charles begins to independently investigate Nanette's murder. He bitches the unscrupulous fence who mocks him. While Charles had always looked down on this fence, the fence laughs at Charles' failure to pass the small on to his son, showing him Andy's business card. Shattered, Charles begins to search for Andy. Meanwhile, Andy conjures a plan to save Hank from Dex. He decides to rob his heroin dealer / gay lover, pay off Dex, and then run off to Brazil. Once again, Andy employs Hank's help in committing a robbery. After robbing the dealer, Andy kills him, as well as a client, which terrifies Hank. Hank starts to moralize, telling Andy that he didn't have to kill them.
Oh no! Anyway,
Andy and Hank make their way to pay off Dex. However, Andy suddenly gets the feeling that Dex is going to continue to blackmail Hank, so he kills the guy. Andy then turns his gun on Chris, and Hank watches, but then begs Andy to stop when he hears Chris's baby crying in another room. This is when Andy turns the gun on Hank. Kinda bad timing, but I get why. Imagine doing so much to save your stupid cuckolding brother after you botched a crime you planned perfectly, getting your mother killed, and then he has to go and act like you're in the wrong. Chris shoots Andy in the back and lets Hank leave. Charles, who's been tailing Andy, sees Hank leave and beckons him, but to no success. So Charles follows the ambulance for Andy to the hospital. There, Andy apologizes to Charles, and the mystery reveals a key detail of the robbery, that Nanette wasn't supposed to be there. Charles then murders Andy gladiator style and leaves. That was a bummer. I like this movie. It was really good, tragic, suspenseful, all the buzzwords, but that ending was just garbage. I get why they ended it that way. Thematically it makes sense. Charles, though presenting himself as a man of virtue, tries to apologize for his evil, so to speak, but is not forgiven by Andy. When Andy apologizes, he is not forgiven either. Rather, Charles reveals his true nature, or reaches a breaking point and commits suicide. I get it. It's just so anticlimactic and not at all a satisfying conclusion to these arcs. Beyond that, the ending is just a cherry on top of this bleak edgelord pie. The whole movie's nothing but misery. Topping it off and nothing but misery, however deserved, leaves me shrugging, wondering why they couldn't have done something better. Andy's a fundamentally broken man who's done plenty of bad things, but he still tries to redeem himself. Even though he's domineering and manipulative of Hank, he clearly cares for his little brother. Otherwise, they would have left him to that blackmailing dog, Dex. After realizing he screwed the pooch by embezzling, Andy also realizes his identity as the successful man is cooked. Tries to fall back on the only identity he has left, that of the fixer, the one who sacrifices every shred of morality to shield his worthless brother, even after discovering the affair. His rage is justified, his self-loathing keeps him beyond grounded, and his willingness to murder anyone to protect Hank, the same Hank who cocked him and caused her mother's death, is psychologically believable if you accept that Andy's entire identity It's built on being the responsible, controlling older brother. He does some heinous things, but he does them for an objectively good reason. All the while, he carries his guilt by himself and takes action to solve his brother's problem. Anyone would be lucky to have a brother like Andy in dire moments. What I think would have been a better ending is if Andy had to live to face his new life. He lost his job, his wife, his brother and mother, literally everything. I would have preferred an ending that presented us with this new life, devoid of everything he thought was his identity. It would have been more powerful to point at an Andy who now has to forge a new identity, literally or otherwise. Killing him with a cop-out that just compounded the same thing the movie is so bogged down with. And Hank gets to live? The guy who caught at every single problem when the ball gets rolling on the narrative? Now there's a reason I recap this movie chronologically. The actual movie starts with the robbery and shifts perspectives and time frames. But if you look at it in order, Nanette's death is where the ball really gets rolling. It's where the conflict truly begins. Hank is an idiot, Andy is broken, Charles is spiraling, and Hank is already such an unlikable moron, but putting the movie in chronological order makes his retardation even more baffling. Every single thing he does couldn't be more the wrong choice, and he still thinks he's in the right after it all goes down. Everything Hank does made me hate him more, and a truly good ending would have been for him to take the bullet. But at the end of the day, it's Andy who is on a clear redemption / bastardization arc. That's why I have an issue with Andy being killed. He is by far the most interesting character, showing the most promise. Ending it with him alone, injured but alive, would have been something for the audience to think about. It would have opened up questions that matter only if Andy's alive. Like, was it all worth it? All those killings that he did to save Hank? What's left for Andy when this is all done? What will Andy do?
You don't get to ask those questions.
And you can't really ask these questions about Charles because who cares? His act of killing Andy doesn't affect his identity. It's more of an acceptance that his identity was wrong. No room for imagination in this conclusion. By snuffing out Andy at the end, Lumet snuffed out any desire for retrospection on the themes of the movie and its characters beyond the narrative. Sure, you can talk about it, but why does it matter? Andy's dead. There's nothing to discuss rather than my imagination of my imagination, as opposed to a logical continuation of this character. When I say what's the point, I'm not asking what the point of the movie is, I'm asking what's the point in caring. The director and writer didn't care enough about the imagination or immersion of the audience to conjure a better ending. And it's so lame. Again, what's the point in caring about this story when its whole point is just...
Life sucks, and then you die.
You get a more substantial conclusion at Dora the Explorer. In trying to be a mature film, Before the Devil Knows Your Death forgets that bleakness and pessimism in and of themselves aren't mature. It's the acknowledgement and conflict against bleakness and pessimism that's mature. I hate to say it, but the ending of this movie makes it what is well known as Reddit coded. And I'm sorry to say it about the guy who directed some of America's most interesting movies. This one just didn't do it for me. Like, comment, subscribe, buy me a coffee.
Goodbye.
The suck zone.
They made you
Suck.
What?
both of them?
Oh, hell no! Oh, hell no!